in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining in our Regalix webcast, Google Analytics 0 to 90 in 40 minutes. My name is Srinivas and I would be the moderator today. You've done your best to get your dream website or web application up and running. Towards the end, you realize you've left analytics out of the equation and won't be able to figure out how users are interacting with your website, where your users are coming from, which marketing channels are working, the dropping off point for your users. Analytics is clearly a key piece of your online presence. In our webcast, you will learn how to get Google Analytics up and running on your site, along with the best practices for tracking events on your site or app. We will also take a look at some of the key features that help marketers optimize media spend and help webmasters discover problems with their sites earlier. Key takeaways would include how to set up Google Analytics, useful reports and metrics in Google Analytics, when to use event tracking, a guide to conversion tracking. Before we begin, let's cover up a few logistic details. All lines are in listen-only mode during the conversation. We will answer questions at the end of event. A link to the recorded webinar will be emailed shortly after the event, and it will be available on demand at www.regalix.com. With that information, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ravish Kamath, Senior Director Products. Ravish, in his position, oversees and manages all engineering efforts and implementations for Regalix Labs. With a strong background in web development, product and business process management, community frameworks, and open source technologies, he is instrumental in managing several projects from idea to execution. Under his leadership, Regalix's online community ventures has developed highly engaged audiences and has gone on to become award-winning successes. With that, let's dive into the presentation. Over to you, Ravish.
Thank you so much, Srinivas, for that introduction. I just wanted to start off this webinar by actually also telling you the pace at which we will cover this webinar. We do have approximately about 20 slides to go through in this presentation, so there are going to be moments where I'm going to spend a lot more time on certain set of slides, but on few other slides I'm going to actually be spending a less amount of time because they may or may not be very critical from a marketeer's perspective. To lay a context on or about Google Analytics, you generally have spent a lot of effort to get your website or application up. And after that is where you really need to start truly measuring different kind of metrics. The metrics that we have broken out in this slide is to largely show the kind of problems that you may have grappled with. For example, across acquisition, engagement, and retention. So common questions under acquisition are, where am I really getting my traffic from? You know, what geographies are working for me? You know, or what's my site's conversion rate? And when we say conversion rate, we are typically saying from a business objective perspective. So things like, are people liking the experience enough that they're going to actually go on and register or buy a product on my site? Things like under engagement, you have users. How are users interacting with my website? Are they able to follow my website? Are they able to reach what the kind of information they're looking for? Things like that. And same goes for retention, a very commonly misunderstood metric where people do not really track retention, in the sense that people place a lot of emphasis on the first visit of the user, but are users really coming back after the initial experience? So in this webinar, we're going to be looking at most of these questions answered from the perspective of Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is not the only choice of analytics package that you have out there, but we are picking on Google Analytics because it's one of the largest widely used analytics package out there, and it's also free. But if you were interested in some of the other analytics packages, there are companies such as Mixpanel, GoSquared, Kissmetrics that are paid options and are equally good and also offer you some additional reporting capabilities over and above that of Google Analytics. As a part of this webinar, we decided to keep our focus very little on getting you actually set up on Google Analytics. Instead, what we have done is given you a link that you could click on once you have this webinar version with you guys. You can click on this link and actually go on to actually getting your Google Analytics account set up. So if you need help with getting your Google Analytics account set up, you can always send us an email. We will have an email at the end of the presentation. You can always send us an email and we'll be glad to help you out. So starting off with the actual meat and potatoes of the Google Analytics offering, at the heart of this offering is a key concept, so which is of metrics and dimensions. If you were to ask me a question, what is a metric? Metric is any kind of measurement of data, right? So it could be the number of people visiting your website. It could be the time people are spending on your website. These are different examples of metrics. A dimension is a unit that is used to describe this data. Now let's say that we said, how many people are visiting your site. But if you wanted to know where are these people visiting from, that's a dimension. So, or if you want to know what campaigns, what marketing campaigns are working, that's a dimension. You see in Google Analytics that all measurements, all data that you look at, you're always looking at this data with a conjunction or through a lens of dimensions and metrics. So let's get to actually understanding the Google Analytics interface to begin with. The first thing that you have to notice is on the top right-hand side, you have a date picker widget. So this is an absolute must, and this is like the ground zero where you can begin all your other analysis work. For example, picking a date range for which you're interested in to look at, let's say, the report for the last 1 month, you would actually use this date picker to actually select this date. Now, you could also do date comparisons using this date picker. So therefore, date picker is one of the most commonly used widgets within Google Analytics. Standard reports that actually make the core part of the Google Analytics navigation. And this is exactly where we will be spending bulk of our time in today's webinar, and where we will look at different kinds of reports that you need to look at, and what are the metrics in these reports that you should be focusing on, and what do they really mean. The data that actually shows up in the core area that's highlighted by the number 2 data in this slide, actually this is the place where you see the data in terms of a graph, trying to see the number of visits you've got on your site, looking at unique visitors, looking at page views, pages per visit, and other information. To improve your productivity, Google Analytics also provides you ready-to-use, not ready-to-use dashboards, but dashboards which you can customize and actually, maybe you want to create a dashboard for your VP, maybe you want to create a dashboard for your CIO, maybe you want to create a dashboard for your CFO. So every persona has a different way of looking at data, because a CFO is probably more interested in the spend, whereas a CMO is probably more interested in, where are my leads coming from, what channels are working, what's the volume of leads we are getting, which geographies we're getting traction in, and things like that. Shortcuts, again, designed for your productivity. So dashboards and shortcuts, we will slot it under productivity. We'll briefly touch it towards the end of this webinar. Advanced segments and customizations. While we will try to give you a good idea about this in our today's webinar, we will not be spending much time on this webinar, as this is probably going to be a topic for some of the future webinars. Going on into standard reports, one of the first reports we will look at is real-time, and real-time reports are useful to actually track or view live traffic on your site. Why would you ever need something like real-time? you would want to use something like real-time reports when you're, let's say you had a new campaign go live. You want to see if that new campaign is sending you traffic. It's always nice to go into real-time reports and actually look and see if this campaign is indeed sending you this traffic. Or let's say in today's world when we are all so dependent on social media, let's say that there is a new tweet about your site or your application, or there is a blog that someone has reviewed your site. You want to see how many people are reading those blogs or seeing those tweets and coming to your site. So you would use something like real-time reports to actually track or view live traffic on your site coming in from these campaigns, tweets, blogs, and of course, one of these other side effects of using something like real-time is to be able to even verify if your tracking code is working on your site. In the next slide, we're looking at one of the key parts of Google Analytics reports. When at the beginning we posed a question about the audience of a site, right? And we questioned from an audience perspective, saying that where are your audiences primarily located? In other words, which countries are they in, or what languages do they speak, or what browsers do they use, what operating systems do they use? And another very core part, which is the behavior. Understanding the behavior of your users can go a long way in actually helping you optimize your site. And when we say behavior, we are talking about engagement, we are talking about loyalty. So as a part of the deep dive under audiences, we have actually picked behavior as a key report that you all need to be looking at to understand engagement and loyalty, and we're going to go a little more deeper within this. So one of the key things we pointed out at the beginning of the webinar is that a lot of people make a mistake of just focusing on just the count of visits, first-time visits. But a very good indicator of loyalty is how many returning visitors do you really have, in the sense that users come to your site, visit your site, and do they ever come back after they visit your site once? And if they do, how many percentage of those users come back? Now, I would also like to remind you that all data that you're looking at is always controlled by a date picker, in the sense that you're looking at a date, you're looking at this data from a date range perspective. So in an ideal scenario, you really want to have a very high returning visitor ratio. In our experience, what we've seen is that this number is generally in the higher 30 to 40% range, and maybe in some cases where you actually may be owning a blog or a site which produces a lot of content, the returning visitor ratio might be higher, indicating that you have great loyalty. So look at the new versus returning report under audience and behavior tab in Google Analytics to really understand what kind of loyalty does your site have. So when we're talking about loyalty, we also want to see what's the frequency and the recency with which people are really coming back, right? How many times do they come back? It was great to actually see in the previous slide that 22% were coming back, but did they just come back once? Did they come back thrice? Did they come back 50 times? Did they come back 100 times? It's always nice to know how many times are the users coming back, because then you can actually plan accordingly. Now, the below report in this slide, we see that 77.63% of the visits are actually first-time visits. Now, may not be a good thing. Generally, I would put this under not a good thing perspective, because if your users are not really coming back, which means they're not really engaging with your site. And they may not be engaging with your site for a myriad set of reasons, which we will cover in the next set of slides. But ideally, you want this number to be higher as it goes down, and at least have visitors coming back to your site multiple times. In terms of engagement, under behavior, you also have a report called as engagement. So this engagement is really about, how long are people spending on your site, right? So we talked about, are people coming back? We looked at returning visitors. We looked at, how many times are they coming back? That's another good indicator. But how long do they spend on your site when they, when they visit your site is also a very good indicator of how engaging your content is, or how engaging your message or how engaging your website user experience is to understand overall engagement. Now, if majority of the visits are in the 0 to 10-second mark, it's generally very bad, which pretty much means that people come to your site, look at it, and they say, "No, this is not exactly what I have in mind. This is not exactly what I'm looking for," and they just go away. Now, you want your visit duration, ideally, a lot more visits and page views to be higher with higher visit duration, which means maybe it's 11 to 30 seconds, but 11 to 30 seconds, okay, even that's still acceptable. But being in the 180-second plus duration mark or visit duration length is generally what's very ideal. And this is what we see with a lot of content-heavy, content-rich sites. Are people really trying to understand your product a little more? Your content is very engaging. Maybe you have a flash demo of your product, and people are spending more time on your site. Therefore, there is a better engagement. So, understanding audience behavior across loyalty, number of visits, and the time they're spending on the site is actually very critical to understand your overall loyalty and engagement. Now, in the last 3 slides, we talked about visits, visit duration, page views, how long it visits, and all of these. So all these data is nothing but metrics. We're all looking at different kind of metrics associated with an audience behavior. In the next section, we'll move on to traffic sources, which is every marketer's dream, in the sense that every person who is in marketing wants to know where am I finding my users? Where are users finding me? So how are they finding your site? Is it referrals that is working? Is it direct traffic through a brand recall? Is it really organic? Is my SEO ranking so good that when people search for a certain keyword term, my site pops up and I'm getting a lot of traffic there? Or is it my social traffic that's really working? Or is it really my campaigns that is working? So when you're looking at the effectiveness of a traffic source, you generally are looking at the kind of metrics that you're looking at is how many pages per visit is every traffic source giving me. So for example, if you say, let's say that you have actually a newsletter campaign where you sent out a newsletter to all your subscribers in your database, and let's say that there are a lot of people coming from the newsletter onto your site. How many pages do they really visit in that session? Do they visit 1 page? Do they visit 5 pages? So that's kind of one way to look at how effective a traffic source is. And how long do they spend on the site? Do they spend a minute? Do they spend 3 minutes? Do they spend 5 minutes? And bounce rate. So on the topic of bounce rate, we will just spend a little more time because this is an important concept to understand, in the sense that bounce rates actually pretty much tell you the number of users who actually came onto a page, which means they actually, let's say that there was a link in your newsletter, and this newsletter link took a user to your homepage of your website. They came to the page, looked at your home site, did absolutely nothing, in the sense they did not click on any other link on their site, didn't go anywhere, but just straight away closed their browser. And this would get recorded as a bounce. So ideally, you want to be looking at traffic sources with a lesser bounce rate, because that means that's traffic sources sending you a decent quality traffic. And when you're looking from an e-commerce perspective, you're looking also at revenue. What kind of revenue is a traffic source driving? What's the conversion rate from a traffic source? Or what's the per visit value? Because this will give you a good idea as to where you need to spend your money and actually see if it's a paid campaign. I want to put in a little more money because I want more revenue to come from this traffic source, or I want to increase the per visit value. So when you're looking at a traffic source, there are a few important dimensions to understand. Note the term dimensions because we talked about metrics in the previous slides, and here we're talking about dimensions because dimensions is used to describe the traffic source. So we have source, medium, keyword, campaign, content as dimensions of a traffic source. Now, more often than not, source will just tell you who sent this traffic to your site, right? Something like Google, the name of the search engine, or it was a newsletter that sent this traffic to you, or it was direct because users knew your website URL and they just typed it directly in the website. Medium, more or less, a medium is part which describes, let's say that you know the source is Google, but okay, Google has multiple channels at work here or multiple mediums at work. You know, Google has organic or Google has CPC, or which is cost per click as well. So what really was the medium? When you say Google sent me 1,000 clicks, how many of it was really organic? How many of it was really CPC is a kind of question that medium answers. Keyword, in case of organic and paid search traffic, it's always nice to know the keywords the visitors actually used when they actually clicked on your ad or your link on Google search and actually landed on your site. However, I'd like to warn you guys that due to some recent changes that Google has been making to their algorithms, or even with the way they're dealing with user privacy issues, they do not track keyword information when users are using SSL search. So typically, if a user is logged in into a Google account, like if their Gmail or their corporate email address that is powered by Google infrastructure, which means they are actually using a secure connection, these keywords will not appear on in your data. That's because Google has taken a stance that they will not be providing this information to the analytics world. So campaign, which is pretty much the heart and soul of any marketing campaign, which is name of the AdWords campaign or any custom campaign that you created, which is the source of this traffic. Content, in case of a newsletter, let's assume that you actually had 2 call to actions. Which one of these call to actions was more effective? Was it the one right at the start of the newsletter, or was it the one right at the bottom of the newsletter? You can use different content labels to indicate this, and you can actually view this data when you're looking at a traffic source. Below is an example of a sample URL that I just constructed. UTM source, UTM medium, UTM campaign are parameters that Google uses to track these different dimensions that I mentioned about. And I've just created a link. Now, if you were to click this link, what would happen is in our Google Analytics, that's on Regalix Google Analytics, I'll actually see that I got a traffic. I got traffic from a source which says February 5th webinar, and the medium was actually PPT, which is this presentation, and the campaign was Google Analytics webinar. So I will actually know where the click actually came from to Regalix website. One of the key reports under traffic sources is all traffic. So this is where you really need to spend some time to understand where you need to be focusing your advertising and site optimization efforts. And the reason I say site optimization efforts is, let's say that you really don't see Google organic source medium in this, top 5. So what does this really mean? This means that, you're not really getting a lot of traffic through organic onto your site. So maybe that's where you really need to spend, focus your effort, because organic traffic is free, and that's the best kind of traffic that you can ever get. So a good way of understanding this report is to really look at a traffic source or medium which is sending you a good number of visits, and the traffic originating from this source is spending a decent amount of time browsing your site, is spending a decent amount of time on your site, and actually has a low bounce rate. If you're an e-commerce site, you can use the e-commerce link under the Explorer to see revenue also associated with the traffic sources of your site. At the end of this webinar, we actually have some ready-to-use reports that you can just click on the link and actually add those reports onto your dashboard or onto your Google Analytics profile, and actually view some of this data readily. One of the other traffic sources where a lot of people find useful is the referral traffic report, in the sense that which domains are really sending some traffic to your site. So is it a blog? Is it someone who reviewed your product? Is it someone you got into an agreement with saying that, hey, I want you to send some referral traffic to my site because I think some of my audience or audiences who are interested in your product are also potentially interested in my product. So this report is really used to see if the traffic sources that you generally expect are really there. Let's say that you actually have some LinkedIn campaign going on. Is LinkedIn really sending you the traffic, right? So you just look at that here. At the same time, you also look for traffic sources that are not expected, in the sense that maybe there is actually a blog that actually reviewed you overnight, and maybe a lot of people are reading those blogs and actually clicking on the link in the blog and actually coming to your site. So you want to also keep track of the expected and the unexpected ones under referral traffic. The next one is the search traffic, which is trying to really understand what kind of breakdown do I have between organic and paid. Like we said earlier, the higher the traffic between organic and paid, or larger the traffic share with organic, the better it is, because organic traffic is free. So again, to evaluate the effectiveness of this traffic, it's the same set of metrics that we would suggest, which is number of visits, visit duration, bounce rate, and revenue dimensions. In terms of AdWords, let's say that you have AdWords set up. We have provided you a link just in case you don't have AdWords set up. You can actually just click this link to actually follow the instructions there and actually link your AdWords account with your Google Analytics account. And once you do, you will actually see under traffic sources, advertising, you'll actually see an AdWords report. You will see that you can use the AdWords report to really understand what campaigns are really working well, right? So what campaigns are sending me a lot of visits, what campaigns are really, sending me bad quality traffic. And how do you know bad quality traffic? When you really have a large number of visits, but a very high bounce rate. As you can see in the first two campaigns that are listed here, there's a 70 to 75% bounce rate on these two display campaigns. And that is generally not a good sign, because this is generally telling you that, of course, these are display campaigns. We generally expect them to have higher bounce rate, but let's assume that these for a minute were not display campaigns. But then having a bounce rate as high as 74%, which means of this 51,000 visits that we got, 75% of the people are just going away, is generally not a good sign, because you're spending money on this and you want the bounce rate to be lower, you want the quality of traffic to be very good. One of the key reports, after we have understood audience, which we understood in the first part, then we looked at traffic source. Let's look at the third dimension, which is when you've done your bit of understanding your audience, where you're getting your audience or traffic, where your traffic is originating from, you want to look at how people are engaging with your site. In the sense, what can you do to improve your site content and navigation? Are people able to connect with your page? In the sense, what are your popular pages? You thought when you went live that you would think that a lot of people would spend time on About Us overview page, but look, they're actually spending time on the solution overview page, right? So looking at pages that have high bounce rate, because maybe that the messaging is not right on that page. People just don't get it, and they're actually just going away from the site. Maybe you need to work on your messaging. So look at pages that have high bounce rate to actually focus on rewriting the pages. How are users interacting with elements on your website? Also can be done via events. We'll look at that in a little more detail down this in the next few slides. So when you're looking at the page's effectiveness, like we have always been saying in the last few slides, which is look at bounce rates. Typically, anything above 45%. 45% is also very high. 40% is also high. But anything above 40-45% is generally a red flag for a page, which means that almost 40 to 50% of the users are not connecting with the page for whatever reason. Exit rate. It's important to understand the difference between an exit rate and bounce rate. Exit rate represent the pages where people are actually leaving your site, in the sense that let's look at all the pages on your website. Let's say you have 14 pages on your website. So what are the pages where they really go away? Let's say if they go away after completing a transaction or after registering on your site, that's actually a good thing, which means they have done their job, you've met your business objectives, they have gone away after actually doing something you always wanted them to do. But if they're actually going away on your homepage, that's not a good thing. If they're going away on a solution page, that's not a good thing. So again, look at exit rate also in conjunction with bounce rate to understand the effectiveness of a page. Looking at an all pages as a report, we just talked about it briefly in the last slide. So look at a breakdown of all the pages on your site. Look at how many page views each site is getting. Look at the time people are spending on different parts of the site. You'll know easily that what pages on my sites are really working well and what pages on my site are not really working well. So this is another way of actually improving the content or site structure on your website. So let's look at now event tracking. So one of the key purposes of this webinar was actually to clear or communicate the critical nature of events. A lot of people use event tracking. Why do people use event tracking? People use event tracking because they don't really have a separate page, because clicking on a button will really start a download. Let's say you're offering a PDF. Maybe it's a best practices PDF, maybe it's a white paper PDF. And when people click on it, right, after registering, you want to know after registering how many people are really clicking on that link to get that report. So how do you find that? You can actually use events to find that. So in an event, what happens is on your website, the link that you want to track is coded in a specific fashion. In the sense, you will see a hyperlink which is defined by the ahrefdomain.com kind of a tag below. It's a HTML tag. We've added on-click event to it, and we have described the Google Analytics push event, which is saying, hey, track this event. The name of this event or the category of this event is download. And when people actually click on download CSV, the label is download CSV. And when people click on download KML, the action is download KML. So what happens is when you go into your Google Analytics report and under content look at events, you will actually see these category of events. You will probably see how many people downloaded a best practice or how many people downloaded a white paper. So you use event tracking to really understand how people are actually interacting with certain specific elements on your web page, as an example. One key thing to note while you're using events is that because of the way events work, when users use events or when users interact with certain elements on your page, the bounce rate shown for the page actually can go down, which means that out of 1,000 people, if 100 people just did not click anything and went away, that is basically a 10% bounce. But let's say the remaining 900 people actually clicked on this events and actually got this, but they got the CSV or the KML, and after that they went away. Those guys are not counted as bounce, but they are because they actually interacted with your web page. So use event tracking to track certain specific interactions. For example, a video player. How many people are really clicking on the play button in a video player? Maybe you've done your hard work, hosted a new video. How many people are really playing that video? Is a good way to, events is a good way to track such information. One of the most understated features in content report is in-page analytics. A lot of people are not aware of this. Trying to understand what's the click-through on different links on your page. Let's say that you have a home page and you expected a lot of people to actually click on in the screen, let's say web or mobile or social, which is part of the main menu navigation, and you actually find the data surprising when you find 14% actually go to About Us. Maybe in hindsight that's not surprising because everybody wants to know who the company is, but you can actually understand what people are really interested in when you lay out your navigation out there. At the same time, look at the orange band at the bottom of the screenshot, which says approximately 14% clicks below. So this is a good idea to understand where your call to actions really need to be. Where are people really focusing their clicks on? What is attracting users' attention? So a lot of clicks are about the fold. That's good, but if there are a lot more clicks below the fold as well, there's another area for you to consider. So this in-page analytics report is a great way to visually assess how users are really interacting with your site, and use this report to really look at the click-through volumes at all the different links on your pages. Let's look at conversions now. Gee, we covered audience, we covered traffic sources, we covered content, but then how exactly is a business objective really met? When you are reporting back to your CMO or when you are really reporting effectiveness of any campaign, there is an end objective. Traffic is not just an end objective, right? Because you want the traffic to do something on your site. You want them to register as someone who wants to trial your product. You want them to actually buy your product. You want them to sign up for a newsletter. There are different business objectives, right? Because we all want data. We want people to sign up. We want people to be constantly interested in our brand, and we want always this, what we call leads. But how do you track conversion? You track conversion on your site by actually defining goals. And so let's look at, how we define goals. Now, when you go into the goals, I would ask you to refer the screenshot below because the title and the content above is wrong. When you look at goals, which is available under the admin part of your Google Analytics section, you will see that one of the first things is you need to create the name of a goal. You need to describe a type of a goal. Most of the times, the kind of goals that people set are, if a user reaches this thank you page after completing this transaction, then that's a goal that I have achieved. Or let's say if people spend more than 10 minutes on a site, that's also maybe a goal. That's when you use visit duration as a goal. Or if you want to set a goal as, I want to set a goal of page to visit ratio. Let's say that I want people to, do 5 visits per, 5 pages per visit. So that's a goal. Or you can set an event as a goal as well. We just talked about event in the previous slide. So let's say a download CSV is an event or which can be used as a goal in this setting as well. So in the case where you set URL destination as a goal type, you will actually need to specify the goal URL as well. And the goal URL is, the URL where people land after they reach a goal. Optionally, you can define a series of pages that the user needs to navigate to reach this goal page. And this is used to do a funnel analysis to just understand where in the step are people really abandoning your goal, this is a great way of looking at it in e-commerce site where you really have a series of 3 steps. First, the user needs to add a product to the cart, then he needs to check out, then he needs to fill in his name and shipping information, then he needs to add his credit card information, then he needs to review and then confirm. So each of these things you can take as a step and actually build a funnel analysis to see where or at which point in this whole checkout process are people really dropping off. So conversions are a great way to actually understand how, what is your business objective and how your site is meeting your business objective. One of the other things, again, underutilized report under conversions is path length. Path length is found under conversions, and so this report actually gives you a very good idea as to how many visits does it really take for a user to convert. Is it that a lot of people just assume that it's going to be love at first sight, and it's going to be that when they come to for the first time, they're just going to convert, but it's more often not true. So what happens is really you have a small percentage of users convert on the first visit, but maybe it really takes, as we are seeing in this screenshot, maybe it really takes 12 plus visits for a conversion to happen, because if you see here, 48% of the conversions are really happening after 12 plus path length in interaction, which means after almost 12 plus visits. So this is a very deep report in the sense that it really gives you an idea as to how patient you need to be to get a conversion and how focused and tuned you need to be to really get a conversion. One of the other things, we talked about productivity at the beginning of the webinar, and one other tip that I would like to give you guys is use custom alerts. Custom alerts is a great way to understand what's really happening with the data. One of the problems with analytics reports packages is that if you're not looking for it, you will easily miss this data. Let's say that in your day-to-day jobs, you're so busy with looking at the standard set of data that you really miss something when something abnormal really occurred. So How do you track that? So under My Stuff, on the left-hand side, you'll see intelligence events. There, under overview, you can actually create custom alerts. And with custom alerts, what you can do is you can actually say, let's specify an alert condition. Whenever the traffic, and for all traffic, when the visits is less than 500, let's say that I generally get 500 visits a day without fail, but let me know when something goes wrong. If the number of visits drops below 500, I need to know. So you can set an alert condition to actually track this. Maybe it's more a happy case, right, where we want to say when the revenue on my site crosses, $10,000 for a day, let me know. So because these are signs to know that something is happening, either something negative is happening or something positive is happening. So you want to know under both cases that something is happening. So use custom alerts to really track when anything out of the ordinary occurs. So in summary, we have looked at real-time audiences, traffic sources, content, and conversions. So use real-time to really monitor the effectiveness of a new campaign that you launched or a tweet or a blog that just went out, and use it to verify if a tracking code is working. Use audiences report to really understand engagement and loyalty and where your users are coming from. Maybe you designed a site and launched it for US, and you actually find that the traffic is coming from UK. So, think about it. So, traffic sources. Try to understand how people are finding your site. Is it paid? Is it not paid? Is organic working at all for you guys? Is it not working for you guys? How effective are these sources? Who's sending the most qualified traffic to my site? This information is really available on the traffic sources. Use content report to understand how people are interacting with your content on your site. Are people getting the message that you're trying to convey? Are people just saying, I don't believe these guys, I'm just going to go away? Or are people just saying, hey, it's so difficult to navigate this site, I'm just going to go away, close this window and go away. So, and again, use conversions report to really understand if business objectives are being met. When people want to know how many registrations have we got through the site, how many people signed up for the newsletter, how many products have we sold. Use conversions report to really track all this information. And as promised, there are a few reports that we have linked here. Some of these are by Avinash Kaushik. He's one of the noted authorities on Google Analytics. And these reports are ready-to-use reports. If you just click on this link, you can add them onto your Google Analytics profile. And the content efficiency analysis report really tells you how efficient all the content on your site really are. Look at it from a page perspective. Social media performance dashboard tells you the performance of different social media properties. You have what kind of traffic you're getting from them, what kind of traffic you're acquiring, what's their engagement, what's their behavior on your site, and all such information. E-commerce traffic report really tells you by traffic sources what kind of volume of traffic you're getting, what's the revenue associated with each of these traffic sources, and similar. And with that, we actually come to the end of this webinar, and I'll be actually passing this back on to Srinivas, and he'll be more than happy to take your questions. So please do let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you for your time, and we know your time is valuable, and we hope that you found the webinar informative. Well, due to time constraints, we are unable to answer some of the questions that have come in. However, we will email you the answers to your questions. For any further queries on online marketing, please feel free to contact njpinkertyn at regalix-inc.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or visit us at www.regalix.com. Thank you so much and have a great day.